Just a quick heads up that today's episode deals with themes including violence against women. So if you're not in the headspace to watch this episode, then we'll be back again tomorrow. Good morning and welcome to the Dailyaus. It's Thursday the 16th of July. I'm Zara Seidler.
I'm Billi FitzSimons.
In less than a week, 3 men and a teenage boy have been charged with murdering women and girls known to them in unrelated alleged attacks across the country. These deaths bring the national toll of women and girls lost to violence this year to 54. In today's podcast, we are going to talk about what we know about each of these cases, the broader national conversation, and how the government has responded to date.
Zara, I feel like we have done a podcast like this a few times.
Yeah, over the years.
Yes, over the years, because tragically, there have been a number of times where we have seen women and girls allegedly killed by men they knew. And it happens in such a volume that the story becomes so big and we sit down and go through what has happened.
Yeah.
And we're having the same discussion now, and we'll get to what the government is doing and whether or not anything's changing on that side of things. But let's first go to why we are talking about it right now.
Yeah.
What has happened this month or even just in the past week that has meant we're having this conversation?
Yeah, so between the 4th and 7th of July, so that's 3 days, 2 women and 2 young girls, children, were allegedly murdered. Now, these women and girls include a 13-year-old girl, her name was Layla Jeffrey, an unnamed 17-year-old, a 39-year-old called Lavanya Chapa, and a 30-year-old named Yana Armstrong. Now, as I said at the top, this brings the total number of reported deaths of women and girls to violence to 54. And I highlight reported because, of course, there are many cases that we don't know about. But the reason these 4 deaths are being linked, despite the fact that they are completely separate incidents, is that all of the men and boys were known to the victims in these cases.
And that's, I think, another word that's really important is alleged.
Yeah.
Because the men and boys that you were talking about, they allegedly murdered these women and girls.
Correct.
But we don't know that for a fact because there is a criminal justice system and these cases have not gone through those criminal justice systems.
No, they're actually all in front of the courts as we speak.
Yes.
So in each of these cases, police have brought murder charges against these boys and men. None of them, to the best of my knowledge, have actually even entered a plea. So we don't even know how they're going to plead, whether they'll plead guilty or not guilty. And so we have to say alleged and allegedly throughout the course of this podcast because, as you said, there has been no criminal conviction in any of these cases.
Language is so important in this conversation, and every time we report on it or when I see other media reporting on it, I see so many conversations arise about the language that is used, and there is some criticism that I think is really valid that we could get to. But then I think with alleged, I know that there is sometimes frustration with how media is reporting it. And when we acknowledge that we don't fully know the details yet, and I understand why that can be frustrating, but as a journalist and as a media company, we are liable for the things that we say. And it is really important that we abide by those rules when it comes to the criminal justice system, because if you don't, you can in really extreme circumstances, jeopardize that system.
100%. And I guess just on a note of accountability for myself, if we're talking about language, a couple of weeks ago when you were away, Elliot and I did a podcast about the Australian man who had been charged with the murder of a Thai girl. I said woman, referring to somebody under the age of 18, and rightly, our listeners said in the comment section that that is not the correct way to refer to somebody under the age of 18. And so I hear that, and that was a really good learning experience for me. And I think for this podcast especially, where we're talking, you know, about a 13-year-old girl and an unnamed 17-year-old girl, these are children. And language there is very explicit and very clear.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the cases. Do you want to go through the stories and cases of each of these women and the girls?
So I'll start with Lavanya Chapa, who was 39 at the time of her death. She was a software quality assurance analyst. She was described by her cousin as a loving mother of a 13-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son, and she was also described as a dear friend to so many. Now, police allege that on the 7th of February, a 39-year-old man, believed to be her husband, fatally stabbed Chapper at her home in Melbourne's east. He's been charged with murder, but as I said before, has not entered a plea. And what we know now is that her family is trying to organise to get her body flown home to India, where they are trying to abide by the Hindu rituals around burial. And I believe that her parents have not even been able to fly here to be with her body because they are unable to. So that is the first case that was reported. And then in a separate case, a 17-year-old girl was found dead in a remote community in the Northern Territory. She remains unnamed, so we are not naming her here. A 34-year-old man who, and I'm going to use language really specifically here, this is quoting police. Police have described this 34-year-old man as being in a domestic relationship with the girl at the time of her death. So those are the words of the police, and that man has since been charged with her murder. He also has not entered a plea. And
that's one of the cases where I have seen criticism of media outlets who have described this 17-year-old girl as being quote unquote in a relationship with the 34-year-old man. But like you said, those are the words of the police that we are quoting there.
And that is the source that we need to go off as reporters.
But of course, we acknowledge the complexities and sensitivities of describing a 17-year-old girl as being in a relationship with a 34-year-old man as being in a relationship.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's the second case. Then the third case was in Western Victoria. Her name was Layla Jeffrey. She was a 13-year-old girl. She's been described by a family friend as a gentle, quiet little girl who just loved life. Now, Layla was last seen on the 4th of July. Her body was found on the 9th of July, and a 16-year-old boy who police say was known to Layla was charged with her murder. And again, for fear of sounding like a broken record, he has not entered a plea at the time of recording this podcast. Then the final victim during this period that we know of was Yana Armstrong. She was 30 years old, living in Toowoomba, Queensland. She was described by her cousin as the glue for her family. She was the mother of a 4-month-old boy, and she was reported missing on the 7th of July, and days later her body was found. Police have charged a 48-year-old man who is believed to be her former partner with murder. He has also been charged with arson and breaching bail conditions. I include that because I know a lot of the conversation around violence against women has centred around bail and people who are out on bail then allegedly committing further crimes. And in this case, that is one of the charges that has been brought against this 48-year-old man. He has also not entered a plea.
And you said this earlier, but I think it's worth bringing up again that we've gone through just 4 cases there of alleged murder against women and girls in this country. But as you said earlier, there have allegedly been 54 women and girls who have been killed so far in 2026.
Yeah, so that number comes from Australian Femicide Watch. That is a register, I'd say, that was created by a researcher and journalist. Her name is Sherelle Moody. Now, according to that list, and again, I think it's important to highlight that there are sometimes discrepancies in the reporting and the numbers that we hear about. But according to Moody's register, that number includes 37 Australian women and 17 children who have been killed so far this year. And she tracks the reported deaths of women and children from murder, manslaughter and neglect. So just getting a bit of a sense of what that methodology is there. But again, there are some discrepancies on numbers. I will just add that according to the Australian Institute of Criminology, in 2024-2025, women were almost 6 times more likely than men to be killed by an intimate partner than by a stranger. Men were twice as likely as women to kill partners of the opposite sex. And so that is a data set that is sitting, I guess, on top of this register that we understand about the state of violence against women and girls in this country.
Hey, my name is Ange, and fun fact, I am one of this is the thedailyaus voices you would have heard at the top of this episode. I'm a partnerships exec here at TDA, which means I'm a part of the team that works to keep the news free for you by bringing on advertisers. So I just wanted to pop in, say a quick hi, and ask that if you'd like to help us grow, it would mean the world if you could hit follow wherever you're listening or watching and drop us a 5-star review while you're at it. It really helps us meet new people like you. Thank you so much for being a part of the TDA community and enjoy today's episode.
Zara, I think the question that we have received the most from our audience this week is what is being done about it and what is the government doing about it?
Yeah.
What is the answer to that?
Well, we asked specific questions of the government around what I would say is the two biggest parts of their remit. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but the first is about the national plan to end violence against women and children. So just for background, this is a almost decade-long plan that the government has now worked on for the second time to bring an end to violence against women and girls. The government defines it as an overarching national policy framework that guides actions towards ending this violence, and that it focuses on 4 main areas: prevention, early intervention, response, and recovery and healing. So what we know is that before the latest cases that we've spoken about on this episode, the government had announced that they were doing consultation on the second part of this national plan. That's not in response to what we have seen happen. That was in May of this year. So that means that they are consulting widely among, stakeholders, domestic violence groups, everyday people. That's actually open to everyone if they want to add to that consultation. But that is what I would say is kind of the cornerstone of how the government is trying to, not just right now, but more broadly over the time they've been in government, respond to this rising issue.
And that national plan to end violence against women and children, that is bipartisan in the sense that it transcends governments. So the first one that you spoke about was introduced in 2010. It was introduced under Prime Minister Julia Gillard and it failed. So like the title suggests, it was a plan to end violence against women and children. And as you know, that is still happening, and so therefore that first plan failed in its mission. It still had some achievements or successes, I guess. For example, it's the reason that we have 1-800-RESPECT, which is the helpline that we often refer to and we will refer to at the end of this podcast. But overall it failed, and now we have this second one. And you're right that the second part of the national plan is not in response to this because it's broken up into 5-year sections because it's a 10-year plan overall. But in terms of any announcements in response to the cases that we've spoken about today or anything like that, there have been no new
not that we've seen at least. Yeah. What I have seen a lot of is calls for a royal commission.
For anyone not familiar with a royal commission, do you want to just take us through that?
Yeah, so that's basically the highest power for inquiry that we have in this country. As we record this, we are on day 4 of this public hearing week for another royal commission into anti-Semitism. There have been royal commissions into the robo-debt scheme, into veteran suicide. There have been a range of them, and there have been calls for a royal commission to be established into this specific issue. As we're recording this, there is a petition that is circulating that has attracted nearly 130,000 signatures. However, the government is fairly resistant to the idea of establishing a royal commission. The idea was put to Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in May of this year, so before these latest cases. And he was asked by Christy Hayes, a Tasmanian journalist, why he wasn't pushing for a royal commission. Here's a bit of what he said.
Look, there's calls for a royal commission about everything.
Well, I think deaths of women are pretty paramount. There
are, but you've got to work out what does a royal commission do besides fund lawyers. What we need here is solutions that we know. We know what they are. We know what's required here. And I understand that people, when confronted with an issue, will call for royal commissions. But we know that there's too much violence against women. We know what keeps women in these relationships. We know what's required in terms of the economic support to get out. We know there's a need for more alternative housing. We know there's a need for more counselling and for community workers. And we need to get on with action.
That sentiment has been reflected by other members of the government. So we had Tanya Plibersek, who is the Minister for Social Services. She was reiterating that the government knows what needs to be done, that there has been so much inquiry into why this is happening. And she says we just need to get on with the action, that the government knows what the solutions are. They've commissioned all that work, but there is clearly an issue when it comes to actually implementing that action. And so that is what the government says they are focusing on right now, despite these, as we said, growing calls, and clearly with 130,000 signatures, quite a groundswell of support there for a royal commission.
All right, that is where we're going to leave the podcast. I think we might just skip the tidbit today. I'm not sure it quite feels appropriate after a topic like this, but we hope you look after yourself and we hope you have a great day. If this episode has brought up any issues for you, help is available on 1-800-RESPECT, on 1-800-737-732. We'll be back later today with the evening headlines, but until then, we hope you have a good day.